If I told you there was a teenager at Sunderland who was on the radar of most of the big clubs in Europe, you'd assume I was talking about Jobe Bellingham, right? Brother of Jude Bellingham, the Real Madrid star? And of course, Jobe is a wonder kid in his own right, but he may not even have the highest ceiling in the Sunderland midfield right now. That title belongs to Chris Rigg, the 17-year-old English midfielder who has already drawn the attention of most of the scouts in Europe. But what makes Rigg so good to already have most of the scouts for the biggest clubs in Europe knocking on Sunderland's door? To answer that, we have to ask, who is Chris Rigg? So there's wonder kids that you've heard of, and then there are wonder kids like Chris Rigg, who, unless you are a Sunderland supporter, you probably hadn't heard of until this past summer when all of a sudden he was being linked with some of the biggest clubs in Europe. Now nothing materialized and he's back at Sunderland, but with continued progression, Rigg is going to be a hot commodity every time the transfer window opens, from now until he leaves Northern England. So when the time comes, you're going to want to know everything you can about your new prized and probably pretty expensive young talent, and we're going to get into all those details here on this video. But before we do, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for me down below so you can follow the channel. Get in that comment section. Is Rigg a player you'd like for your club? Where do you think he's going to end up? Get down in that comment section. Let me know what you think. You can also leave comments on Twitter at PitchsidePub, and check out the website pitchsidepub.com. Born in Hebburn, England, Rigg's career has never taken him more than 20 minutes from home. He signed with Sunderland's academy out of primary school and has always been a black cat, at least professionally, although he did grow up in a Newcastle family. It didn't take long for Rigg to make his debut at the Stadium of Light, however, as injuries forced Rigg into action in an FA Cup match against Shrewsbury Town in January of 2023 at the age of just 15, making him the youngest outfield player in Sunderland's long history. It was the following season, last season in 23-24, where we saw Rigg really burst onto the scene and become a regular with Sunderland. Injuries once again forced his manager's hand, this time into regular playing time for the now 16-year-old Rigg. But it was Rigg who forced his manager to keep him in the lineup even after his teammates' health returned, thanks to an infusion of energy and effectiveness from his play in midfield that led to him appearing in each of Sunderland's final 11 games of the championship season, getting the start in 9 of them. His play during the final stretch of last season did nothing to dispel the interest from Premier League clubs, with the strongest links to Rigg coming from Newcastle just up the road. Sunderland was able to prevail, signing a 2-year extension on top of the 1 year he had remaining, but of course contract extensions do nothing to dispel interest from bigger clubs, and of course neither does strong play. Rigg has established himself as a regular this season, now at the age of 17, starting every game under manager Regis Lebris so far this season. While his play for the currently surging Black Cats is surely only going to add to the attention Rigg receives from outside clubs, it's nevertheless good that he has remained at the Stadium of Light at least for another half a season, if not all of 24-25. Why? Because for Rigg, there's really nothing to lose by staying at Sunderland for one more year. At 17, even a major injury is less likely to derail his career the way a move to the wrong club possibly could. Entering the summer, he had just 21 championship appearances and a few FA and Carabao Cup games on his first-team resume, yet he was receiving interest from Champions League level clubs. A jump of that magnitude would have landed Rigg either entrenched on a bench or back on youth teams, whereas staying at Sunderland has enabled him to get first-team action in a very tough league. But while it was smart for him to stay at Sunderland for one more season, it's no surprise why the big clubs wanted him. Rigg is a player you have to watch to fully appreciate. He's not going to light up the stat sheet with tons of goals, or even light up the player tracking data with world-class pace, though his pace is fine. Rigg stands out due to his superior technical ability, which is even more impressive given his young age. Teenagers can be blazing fast. They can have a powerful shot and they can know lots of fancy dribbling moves that they have perfected against inferior competition, but rarely are teenagers as technically sound as Rigg is at such a young age. Rigg is advanced as a dribbler and a passer, not just by 17-year-old standards, but by the standards of players in the English Championship, and it's those skills that most scouts see as easily transferable to higher levels, as they only improve with more first-team game experience. But skill without the right mindset is only half the battle, and Rigg has demonstrated many abilities that simply cannot be taught. Rigg is an absolute pest in the midfield. He operates with an aggressiveness that not all players have and some never develop. He's completely fearless despite playing against grown men a decade his elder, willing to take them on as both a dribbler and a defender. At the higher levels, he's going to have to learn how to not have his aggressiveness exploited by more experienced players. But those are things that come with game action, and in the meantime, the good is going to dramatically outweigh the bad. Rigg possesses 2 innate skills that go unnoticed on highlight reels and social media, but are essential to dominating possession in the midfield and controlling the game. First touch and tenacity. First touch can be taught, but it'll never beat natural ability. Rigg keeps the ball on a string in tight spaces, on long passes, or any other time he touches it. When the ball does begin to bounce around, my money is on Rigg to come away with it, or to punch it to a teammate. His aggression manages to stay under control when the ball is loose, and his tenacity for 50-50 balls will rival anyone he comes up against at higher levels. For any manager that values possession and midfield control, Rigg is going to be a welcome addition to his club. Teenagers are still growing and still developing, and the physicality of the higher leagues is yet another reason why it's good Rigg is back in the championship for yet another season. Not that the championship is any easy endeavor. Standing at just 5'8", Rigg looks like he might be knocked over by a stiff breeze, let alone an opposing player. And he might be, but he'll bounce right back up and he still has the physical development to come. As with many young players, he's bounced around the pitch, both looking for a home and because he can. Listed as an attacking midfielder in most places, that label is actually a misnomer. Though he can play it, Rigg operates much more as a box-to-box midfielder. While he has the dribbling and passing skills to operate as a number 10, his finishing isn't up to par with what most big clubs would want from that position, at least not yet. His willingness to work defensively makes him a suitable fill-in as a number 6, or a good fit to be the more forward-moving defensive midfielder in a double pivot formation. But his true calling is as an old-school number 8, operating the full length of the midfield. Rigg profiles best as a deep-lying playmaker, which means he can operate out of that double pivot 6 or a traditional 8 in a 3-man midfield. He's a progressor with the ball, which can come in many forms. His aggression carries over to his passing, as Rigg loves to make vertical passes to runners in the box and pairs well with teams who have pacey strikers or wingers that like to get behind defenders. On the Athletics 18-player role chart, Rigg profiles on the border between advanced and deep midfielders, falling somewhere between the box-to-box and orchestrator labels. That's a great place to be, as it gives him tons of options for future managers to fit him into many different styles and formations. Rigg is not going to be a player who dominates the traditional stat lines, but for those who watch the game closely and appreciate the nuance of midfield play, Rigg is going to be a fan favorite very quickly for any club that he joins. It's pretty safe to say at this point that Rigg's long-term future is not with Sunderland, although a promotion to the Premier League could throw a wrench into that. He's already been linked with a number of Premier League clubs and some big clubs outside of Europe, and after the trade deadline closed this past summer, there were links to Borussia Dortmund and Real Madrid who might look to make a move this winter. The latter, Dortmund, would be a great spot for Rigg's next step, given their proven track record of not just acquiring, but actually developing and playing young talent. A club like Madrid is obviously enticing, but a crowded midfield and a propensity to continually acquire stars could easily end up blocking Rigg's playing time and thus his development. There will be interest in Rigg this January, but if Sunderland's early season success in the Championship continues, and Rigg's role in that success continues as well, Sunderland will be hard-pressed to sell him off mid-year. None of the offers they receive will disappear by the summer, and Rigg continuing to prove himself will only raise the price. Rigg is pretty likely to move on to a Premier League club next season. However, if Sunderland can get a promotion and become a Premier League club of their own, that does give them an opportunity to hold on to him at least for one more season, probably coinciding with yet another contract extension, and maybe hold on to him for a few years if they can manage to stay in the Premier League. Rigg is, however, destined for a Champions League caliber club at some point, probably before he turns 20, and unless Sunderland can make a massive move up the ladder and earn one of those spots for themselves in the next few years, they are almost certainly going to have to let him move on at some point in the next year or so. And when they do, they are going to cash in big. I would love to get your thoughts on Rigg. Do you want him at your club? Where would you like to see him go? Or would you like to see Sunderland hold on to him? Get down in that comment section. Let me know what you think. You can also leave comments on Twitter at PitchsidePub. While you're at it, hit that subscribe button for me down below so you can follow the channel and check out the website pitchsidepub.com. Thanks as always for joining us here on Soccer Wonder Kids at the Pitchside Pub.